Have you ever picked up a book, marked it up, dog-eared the pages, and think, where has this been all my life? Hey, it's Heike. That's what I hope Pursue Your Spark will be for you. This isn't just something to read. It's something to live. Inside, I break down the 5 biggest emotional traps that keep midlife women stuck and guide you through 6 simple, powerful worksheets so you can stop spinning your wheels and start feeling strong, steady, and feel like yourself. It's like a warm, encouraging conversation mixed with a clear action plan. And if today's episode hit home at all, this book will feel like it was written for you. There's a point when many women in midlife realize they've stopped saying what they need, not because they don't care, but because staying quiet feels easier than risking tension. Nothing is falling apart, yet something feels off and the distance keeps growing. In today's episode, I'm joined by therapist and author Colette Fehr to explore why this happens so often in midlife, what it quietly costs women in energy, confidence, and connection, and how silence slowly becomes a habit. We talk about practical ways to speak up without blame, escalation, or drama. Using your voice feels steady and doable, not risky. And here's the question this conversation leaves you with. If keeping the peace has required you to keep shrinking, what is that silence really costing you? If you've been telling yourself it's fine, but deep down you know something needs to change, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Pursue Your Spark podcast, and I'm your host, Heike Yates. This is a show for the in-between seasons of midlife, where we uncover the habits and comfort zones keeping you stuck and move you towards strength and action without forcing a reinvention. Many midlife women wouldn't say they're unhappy. They just feel like they're gone quiet about what they need, quiet about keeping the peace, quiet because speaking up feels exhausting. And over time, that quiet starts to cost us in marriages, friendships, family dynamics, and even how we show up for ourselves. And that's why I invited Colette Fehr to help us put words to what's really happening and talk about how to start using our voice again in a way that actually feels doable. Welcome, Colette.
Thank you so much. I love your intro. You did just such a beautiful job capturing the heart of it.
I'm so glad you're here. And we're diving right in and we're reinforcing what I just said. So many women, midlife women, wouldn't say they're unhappy. They just feel invisible and stay quiet. How do you see this showing up for women even before they realize that this is actually happening?
It's often very unconscious, and it's fascinating because as a therapist in my office, I hear the same thing from women over and over. And these are smart, accomplished, emotionally intelligent women who are good communicators, but they will say to me, I wish I'd spoken up sooner. Somewhere along the way, I've really lost my voice. And like you said, they often feel invisible, but stuck in a bind, which is that to speak up only rocks the boat or creates problems. It doesn't feel productive. And so they start to swallow and suppress. But we know that that suppression comes at a tremendous cost to our relationships and, most importantly, our relationship with ourselves.
Yeah. You help women and couples find their voice and have hard conversations with those people. What led you to this work, and why do you see these patterns showing up so often in midlife? And also, you're just publishing a book coming out very soon. So tell us more about it.
Yes. So my book, The Cost of Quiet, How to Have the Hard Conversations That Create Secure, Lasting Love, is born of this struggle. And it's out February 3rd with Penguin Random House. You can get it wherever books are sold and on my website. And I'm going to give you in the book and what we talk about today, a very actionable process for beginning to address what's this big problem. And I got into this work for much of the same reason that I wrote the book, which is that you probably already can tell, I'm not a quiet person. Okay. Nobody has ever called me quiet. So it's kind of ironic that this is the title of my book. I'm very talkative. I grew up in a family where, I'm from New York. I'm half Irish. I'm half Italian. Everybody had a lot to say. Everybody was talking over everybody. And I have wonderful, loving parents, but they got divorced when I was in college. And because I grew up Catholic, my parents didn't believe in divorce and they really tried to stay married. So they argued a lot through those years. And as a kid, I found that I was stuck in the middle. I would feel very agitated and upset when they would argue, as I'm sure many people can relate to and you can imagine. And the message I got was, ooh, I don't want to argue. Fighting is bad. I want to have a perfect marriage one day. And that to me meant peaceful, happy, no fighting. And so I married this man I met in college who was from this very Southern, and they're lovely people, but nobody ever had a crossword to say. Nobody raised their voice, but nothing was addressed ever in any kind of like meaningful, difficult way. So I kind of flipped, the pendulum swung, and I chose this really conflict avoidant, what I call a surface relationship. And I thought that was the answer. I thought the fact that we didn't argue meant things were good. But really over the years, and I think this comes out the most in midlife for us, finally, as women, we wake up to our needs. I didn't realize that I was swallowing everything I needed because I didn't get a very good response when I spoke up. And that started to really erode my own well-being, and it creates tremendous resentment, bitterness, contempt, and distance.
Absolutely. My family is more like your first marriage is. My family talks about nothing. They
Still to this
swallow.
day?
They, they
Yeah.
still swallow everything. They rather not say something that's unpleasant in order to not make somebody angry or not like them.
Yep.
And it is still stuck. And it always bothered me because I'm like you, I'm a very outspoken. I'm like, I want to hear the truth. I'd rather hear the hard truth and maybe have an argument than swallowing something that makes me just feel sick inside and unhappy.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it does to us. And that's where I live now. And what's interesting is that for a lot of women, they may actually be able to do that in other contexts. They may be able to do that in business. Some women are very assertive in the workplace, or they're more assertive with strangers. But when it comes to the romantic relationship, we have an added layer. First of all, conflict, it's natural for it to feel uncomfortable. But these relationships are so important to us. We know from attachment science that we're wired to bond and connect. So if you don't know how to address conflict constructively, then it feels like a threat to the relationship to bring up something unpleasant or uncomfortable, to risk pushing your partner away, upsetting them, being judged. All of those things we're scared of.
What is an attachment wire, Colette?
So we used to think years ago in the psychology that children need secure attachment from parents, meaning that they're consistent, reliable, creating safety, and there to tend to a child emotionally when they're sad or scared. What we now know from decades of research is that adults need this type of consistent and reliable comfort and reassurance too. And that we are biologically wired to connect to other people and form really secure bonds. And that not only does that make us happier, that actually we live longer. From the Harvard study on adult development, which you may be familiar with, it is the biggest longitudinal study, meaning it's covered the span of many years. It's actually 85 plus years and running, where they have studied what are the factors that make people live a long time. And you might think it's financial resources or good genetics, but no, it turns out the number one predictor of a long, happy life is the quality of your relationships. So it's not enough to have them. They have to be good. And that's about emotional connection. It's about responsiveness. And it is really answering the question that psychologist Sue Johnson poses, which is, when I need you, are you there for me? And when we have relationships that we feel like we can turn to that person when we're down, when we're scared, because we still have those moments as adults, then we live longer, we feel better. And those are the relationships where we can begin to take the risk to speak up with vulnerability and really get our needs met. The catch is, if we don't take the risk, we'll never get the reward. And oftentimes it's easier to express yourself than you might think. We just have to learn through experience that the fear is bigger in anticipation than reality.
Yeah, which leads me to many women think they're just being easygoing when they're actually disappearing. And how do you explain quiet quitting in a way that helps women recognize themselves without blame and guilt, and not just in a marriage, but also in other relationships?
Yeah. This
That's a
is so
big one.
important. It's a great one. I love the way you framed it too. And I'm just thinking in real time how astute it is to say help women recognize, because I think what happens is this becomes automated and we're so quick to dismiss ourselves that we don't even always notice anymore that we're doing it. So, of course, it starts with really tuning in inside into your body, being very aware in the moment, catching your thoughts and the story you're telling yourself. I call it the negative partner story, but it can also be a negative self story, meaning the brain is a meaning making machine. So when we're feeling something, we're narrating, we have thoughts that go with what's happening that are often generated by what we're feeling. So, for example, just to ground this in reality, if you've asked a partner several times to, I don't know, pick up your dry cleaning on the way home, let's just say, okay, right? No big deal. Most things are these small little moments, which is where we need to start. That's why I pick something so mundane. And let's say they've forgotten for the fifth time in a row, and you just want to pull your hair out. You're busy. You really needed this help, but it's more than that. It's a pattern where you don't feel heard in the relationship. So before you just swallow it and say, oh, you know what? It's not worth a fight. I'll just go get the dry cleaning myself. They never listen to me anyway, or it won't make a difference, right? That's the moment we can tune in. And it starts with, what am I feeling in this moment? Noticing the body sensations, naming your emotions, not the story, right? The actual feelings. I'm hurt. I'm sad. I'm disappointed. I'm angry. And then asking yourself, what do I need in this moment? And something like this example might be just saying to your partner, hey, I'm not telling you that this is the truth, but when you didn't get the dry cleaning the fifth time in a row, I felt really hurt and disappointed and angry because I've asked several times. And the story in my mind is that you just don't listen or my needs aren't important. But because this relationship matters to me, I'd rather tell you how I'm feeling and ask if you could please make an effort. If you do tell me you're going to do something, to follow through, that would tell me that you're hearing me and I'm important to you. And when we say it like that, then we're not creating that inner charge of unhappiness and getting sick.
That takes a lot of guts, Colette, to just what you said, because in my mind, as you phrased those story, I was like, oh, I remember this. I have told my whoever to do this a million times. And I always felt ignored. I always felt like, oh, they're not listening. I'm really hurt. And I felt down. But sometimes I didn't have the guts to speak up. Yeah. Do you feel isolated, worn out, and disconnected from the life you used to enjoy? Maybe your friends invite you to go hiking or play pickleball, and you say no, not because you don't want to go, but because you know you won't be able to keep up. You watch their lives move forward while you quietly sit it out, feeling embarrassed by how much your body has changed. Maybe you feel a shift in your marriage. You're tired. You don't feel attractive. The energy and confidence aren't there, and intimacy doesn't feel the way it used to, even if you never talk about it out loud. Or maybe you love your grandchildren, but you hesitate to say yes to watching them because deep down, a whole weekend will be too much. Sometimes your daughter already sees that, and that can hurt in ways that are hard to explain. If any of this feels familiar, you don't have to figure it out alone. Send me an email and share a little bit about what you've experiencing. What's been frustrating, where you feel stuck, and what are you longing to change? I read every message personally, and my intention is to give you something useful you can implement right away. Email me at heike@heikeyates.com. This can be the beginning of a new chapter, one where your body supports the life you want rather than holding you back.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest dilemma. And this is where the attachment wiring is so important. It is part of our biology that on the one hand, it's natural to speak your truth. It really is. We're designed to honor our emotions and bring forward what we feel and need. It's healthy for us. But on the other hand, we're wired for attachment to not jeopardize, create an argument, push our partner away. So the only way really is the willingness to act in the face of that fear. Nobody feels that courageous. Now, I've been communicating like this for a long time, and I spent all day, every day teaching people to talk like this. So I rattle it off like it's nothing. And my husband jokes, he's like, wow, I wish I had gotten you on the first round. Now you're so outspoken about everything. And he's kind of kidding, but not really, probably. But I will tell you that the only way is through. And when you do it and you're really honest and you're direct, but you're also vulnerable and kind, which is, I think, the part people miss, that they have to go together, right? We don't want to swallow, but we also don't want to blame, criticize, attack. When it's saying, hey, this is what's going on inside of me, and I'm taking the risk to share it with you because I want us to be good and I want to feel close and I want you to know and understand me. A great majority of the time, it's really well received. And even if it's not, you feel good after because you spoke your truth. 99% of the time, people in my office say, after I ask, what was it like to share that? They say, wow, I feel good. It feels like a relief, regardless of how the partner responds.
I love it because I've many times, and you see this in movies as well. Women, when husbands say, "How are you, honey?" and they're like, "Fine."
Yes, it's the classic, right?
Fine. It's exactly fine. The way it sounds is not fine.
Right.
So,
You're not fine. If I'm saying I'm fine, right? It's like the number one passive aggressive. I'm not fine, but I don't know how to tell you. I'm scared to tell you. And I don't think you'll respond to me.
yeah.
There's so
So
much under that.
yeah, when women stay quiet for all these years and tell themselves they are fine, what happens to their energy, confidence, and their sense of self over time?
Okay, this is the heart of it. I love your questions, Heike. They're so perfect and spot on. I can tell you're the pro you are. This is the problem. It destroys our relationships, first of all, because we're trying to protect the relationship by not speaking up. But avoidance breeds resentment. And that is also, right, that creates emotional distance and disconnection. So long term, we end up quiet quitting and not always realizing it. But then the bigger cost that is the real impetus for this book is that emotional suppression has been linked to anxiety, depression, cardiovascular disease, irritable bowel syndrome, autoimmune disorders, cancer. This literally kills us. And I just gave a talk about my book the other night to a group of about 40 women. And a woman came up to me after the talk with tears in her eyes. She has stage 4 cancer. She's such a champion. She made me cry how inspiring she is. And she said, look, I'm going to make it through this no matter what they tell me. This cancer isn't going to get me. And she said, I know I got sick because I did exactly what you described. She said, I'm a marathon runner. I'm a healthy eater. I have good genetics. She said, for years in my life, I would always tell myself, oh, I'm doing the right thing. I'm putting other people first, or let me not upset this person or that person. This is not the noble, self-sacrificing, selfless thing we think. This is actually dishonoring and destroying ourselves, and it will end our lives if we let it.
I can see that. Yeah. I just have somebody in my mind that exactly fits what you just said. She has gallstones. She always has an upset stomach. She always has some issues that come out of nowhere, it seems, but they keep going over years and it's not getting better. And that's the person I'm thinking of, is keeps eating her truth, what I call the truth. Say what you think and be honest to what your needs are and what you're feeling.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And this is, I was becoming like this in my first marriage. Now, I got divorced young, but I was becoming bitter, angry. I could feel the stress in my body. I felt like it was my partner's fault. I couldn't communicate, but it was really my own fear and avoidance, not saying the real thing, the truth, not honoring ourselves can then become a way to try to manage somebody else's response. So what we really have to know is this is something we owe to ourselves. It's going to be a little scary, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And I like to make this a little more digestible in simple terms, I like to boil it down to, a couple of steps, the ABCs, that the first is act in the face of fear. So just like you said, it takes guts. Feel the fear and do it anyway, right? That's an old psychology book from the 90s. That's so great. A lot of hard but important things do feel a little scary. It is going to feel a little uncomfortable, even when you've been doing it for a long time. You don't have to not feel afraid, just be willing to do it scared. And the second is be vulnerable. And being vulnerable it's so co-opted and overused, this word, that it's almost lost meaning. But I like to think of being vulnerable as just telling the truth about what you're feeling. And instead of your negative partner story, your interpretation of your partner, which people in therapy will say, well, I feel like you don't care and you don't listen. That's not being vulnerable about your feelings. Being vulnerable about your feelings is I feel angry and hurt. Almost all roads go to hurt, anger, fear, shame, loneliness, disappointment. That's it. So look for those emotions and name them and be vulnerable. Let your partner see you. Intimacy means into me see. No one can respond to you lovingly if they don't really know what you're feeling. And vulnerability invites vulnerability. When you really say to someone, you didn't call me back and it hurt my feelings, it's really hard to be like, F you, how dare you? But if you say to someone, you never call back, you don't care about me, and I'm done with you, you're probably not going to get a great response. So be vulnerable is number 2. And then number 3 is the assertiveness piece. Communicate assertively. And assertiveness gets a bad rap. It's confused with being aggressive or bossy. Yeah, it's not that. Assertive is just being direct and clear. But again, also being kind. You can be firm and be tactful. And that's not the same as like being nice, right? And shrinking ourselves.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because again, when we say things to people, like you said, in this like snippy tone, you didn't take out the trash again, nobody's going to respond with a kind way because they feel attacked.
Exactly.
And that's not what we want. There's not a way of communicating when you're attacked and when you're feeling put down, like you just explained.
Criticized. Yeah, attacked and criticized. Nobody responds well. And I think we've got to remember feedback is really hard to hear, especially when it's your most important relationship. We're all sensitive. Deep down, we're all scared to be abandoned and rejected. It's also wired into our survival system because we're pro-social herd animals, right? So to be rejected or abandoned means we die.
Right.
So if you hear from your partner, you didn't do this thing again, you're disappointing me, just know we're all sensitive to that. So we should still express our grievances, but we do best and we're most likely to be heard and get through when we say them from the perspective of, here's what's happening inside of me. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I really need. And I really care about you. And because I care about you, I'm making an effort to try to communicate with you.
Wouldn't you think that women in midlife, for me, midlife is 40 to 80. Some people say, no,
Totally.
God. But I mean, we're healthier, we live longer, we live stronger. I mean, to go midlife to
Especially if
me.
we have the habits like you, Heike. You're going to live forever.
Well, I don't know if I want that. If my mind goes, I probably don't want to.
I agree.
So with all the experience we have, don't you think that most of us should be, air quotes, be more able to have these conversations because we're wiser and we're more self-aware? Oh, what are your thoughts around that?
It's such an interesting question. You would think, but I got to tell you, I have a lot of couples who come into couples therapy for the first time in their 60s, even 70s. And if you grew up in a family, like we talked about, where nothing was addressed, and you really feel, so we all feel a little uncomfortable confronting, unless you're a sociopath. It's normal for it to feel a little uncomfortable when relationships matter. So if you've been doing that for years, chances are nothing has happened to help you get out of that without some proactive effort. But the catch of all this, we've talked about the health consequences. The catch of all of this is that you really cannot have an emotionally intimate relationship if you're not willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. I mean, it's just impossible. So I also hear from women all the time, I feel lonely in my relationship. I feel disconnected. Well, maybe your husband, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, let's just say as an example, maybe your husband isn't going to meet you in that place of deep intimacy, but maybe he is. And maybe you're not putting out there the opportunity because you're so sure it won't happen that you're protecting yourself. And this starts in these little moments where you say, hey, you forgot to pick up the dry cleaning. And I need to tell you how I feel about it. And I hope you're willing to hear me out. I'm not going to attack or blame. This is about me and my reaction. And remembering that most things that trigger us are our own old wounds coming up in the moment. And we can really heal when we address them.
So this goes really back to that we need to start building trust with ourselves once we notice that we have those patterns, right?
Yes, exactly. And I would tell people you've got to start really, really small. Like I'm so good now at communicating this way in my intimate relationships because this is my whole world. But I still really struggle where I have what I call in my book, good girl-itis, which is still a big societal problem. I have a harder time in certain friendships or even sometimes in business relationships, not really with my own clients, but where if I've hired somebody and I don't feel good about the way it's going, I still feel a lot of agitation around, wait, is it me? Am I going to say this in a way that upsets them? Am I going to damage the relationship? So I've still got to really work there. But every time you pick a little thing and you say, hey, here's what I need, or I had this feeling, or I have this thought, every time you just put it out there, even if it doesn't go perfectly, you build that self-trust and it does get easier. This is an emotional muscle that has to be built through experience, just like going to the gym and lifting weights. There's really no other way. right? My bicep is all flabby. You would be very disappointed. But if I did it's not enough to know bicep curls are good for me. I got to pick up the weight and do it.
Yep, absolutely. So what's one thing that a woman is listening on the show and says, oh, yeah, Colette, this is me. What's one small and honest conversation she can start this week without turning it into this big blowout or blow up?
Yes. I would pick something very small that bothered you, that maybe you just automatically said, forget it. It's not even worth bringing up. That's the most common thing. It's just not worth bringing up. If you found yourself saying that, I would challenge you to start. I don't even care if you say it yet. Go back to that instance and have a conversation with yourself. Invite a gentle inquiry within and get curious. Wow, what did I actually feel? What was going on in my body? Was there tightness in my chest? Was there tension? Did I feel hot? Bring yourself back there. What emotions were there? Name your emotions. Emotions are clues as to what we need. What was my story? What did I say to myself about my partner or me or the relationship? What was I afraid would happen if I said something out loud? Right. And when you get those answers, I'm going to be so eager to hear. And anyone who wants to reach out to me, my website, ColetteJaneFehr.com, you can get in touch with me very easily. Also on Instagram at ColetteJaneFehr. Write me a message. Try this and tell me how it went with yourself, what you noticed. You're going to be amazed when you ask yourself questions from that wise, loving adult part of you to the parts of you that are hurting. You're going to get answers. And once you get these answers, you can sit with it and shape it into something very clear that you can go to your partner with. And along those lines, I would say too, that if you order my book through my website, ColetteJaneFehr.com, I have lots of free tools that give you the scripts for this from the book, where once you have the answers, I spell out exactly, it's like emotional Mad Libs, where you fill in your own stuff, but exactly how to say it to give you the best chance of being heard.
That's very helpful. And as always, at the end of the show, I ask my guests what SPARK stands for them: strategic, purposeful, authentic, resilient, knowledgeable. Pick one of those and tell us what you think.
So I love it all. You know, what came to me immediately, and I have goosebumps, is human connection. This is really my purpose. This is what I live for. This is what sparks me. This is why I do what I do, that we are meant to connect to other people. So what I want to leave people with is, regardless of how much or how little you speak up, we need to connect to others, and you'd be amazed how the littlest thing, even with a stranger, a smile, a friendly gesture, a compliment, can connect you and boost your day. So get off your phone, make eye contact, talk to other people, and let's keep connecting in person, because we really need each other.
I love that. That was a beautiful closing sentence.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show, Colette. It was a pleasure, and I know my listeners will get so much value out of our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for listening.
And in the next episode, we're looking at why so many midlife women finally decide to speak up and still walk away feeling misunderstood, dismissed, or shut down. We explore the one question most women never ask themselves before they speak up, and how skipping it quietly undermines even the most honest conversations. Don't miss this one.